Hello, I will continue to talk about the rules of chess. Uh, I will start with the progress of the game. The player with the white tools is the first to play. Each player in turn moves one of the tools in his possession, only one tool except in the case of castling, where each tool has its own unique way of moving, as I have mentioned in the previous lesson, and so on until a decision is made. The player can move any piece in turn and move it wherever he wants, provided that he doesn't violate the rules for moving the pieces. Also, if a certain player's king is exposed to a threat from an opponent's piece, a situation known as a check, the player must do everything in his power to eliminate this situation. If he fails to eliminate the threat, he will lose the game in a state known as checkmate. Any move that doesn't result in this immediately will be illegal. So when your opponent threatens in this position, the black bishop threatens a check on the white king, as you can see. So the white side must react to the check. Any move that doesn't result in this immediately will be illegal. So, if for example the white, in this position, if the white moves his pawn like from h2 to h4, then it will be an illegal move. Why? Because the black threatens check on the white king, so he must react to the check. So this is an illegal move. In addition to this, any move that would immediately result in the player's king being in a check is also illegal. In this position, the white must eliminate the threat of check by the bishop. So, for example, he can block the line of the attack, and this is a legal move. And also, another rule is that um, in this position, the white cannot move with his king to the square e2. Why? Because he exposes his king to a threat of check by the black bishop. So this move is an illegal move. The king is the only piece that must not be deliberately placed under threat by another piece. So, as I've already told you, this is an illegal move. Now I will explain the rules of beating. If one of the opponent's pieces stands in the way of the moving piece, for example, in this position, as you know, the bishop moves diagonally, so he can move on this diagonal, and in the square g2, the pawn stands in the way of the black bishop. So the black bishop can eat it, provided it is a legal move. Okay, so in this position, if it is black's turn, the black has the right to eat this pawn. Maybe it is, of course, it is not a good move, but it is a legal move. Why it is not a good move? Because after the black bishop eats the white pawn, then the white bishop can eat back the bishop. So actually, as you can see, the black won a pawn and lost a bishop. A bishop is about, the bishop's value is about 3.25, and the pawn's value is only 1 point, so it is not a good move to take the pawn, but the black has the right to take the pawn, if it is black's turn, of course. Unlike in checkers, for example, eating is a right and not an obligation. So, as you can see, in this position, the black has the right to eat the white pawn on g2, but it doesn't have to eat that pawn. It is not like checkers. And also, as I've told you, it is not a good move to eat the pawn. By eating another tool, it means removing it from the board and replacing the eating tool in its place. So, if the black bishop hits the pawn, that means that we remove the pawn from the board, and in place the pawn, we place the black bishop on the square of the pawn. Okay? The king cannot be beaten. Okay? So, in this position, for example, you have the black bishop threatens check on the white king. So, the white king must react to that threat, and if he does another move, it will be an illegal move. Other move that not reacts to the threat check by the black bishop, it will be an illegal move. It is customary to declare in a situation where he is exposed to a threat and cannot be defended for checkmate. Some shorten it to mate. So I will show you a position of checkmate. So this position is a position of checkmate. Actually, the black checkmated the white. The black won the game. Why? Because the black bishop threatens the white king, and the white king has nowhere to go, because he cannot go to the square G4, because in G4 he will be threatened by the pawn H5, and it is not allowed to go. It is not allowed. The king is not allowed to go to a square that is threatened. So it's not allowed to go to the square G4, because in this square he is threatened by the pawn H5. And he also cannot go to the square E4. Why? Because in square E4 he is also threatened by the black bishop. So actually this is a match situation, and the black won the game, because the king has not no, actually I made a mistake, because in this situation actually the black has a way to protect himself from the check by the bishop. He can do this move and it is not checkmate, but if we correct the position, in this position, actually this position is a checkmate position. The black side did a check mate or a mate to the white king, because the king has nowhere to go and he cannot block the attack line, and he cannot take the pawn on e3 because this pawn is protected by this pawn. So as I already told you, the king is not allowed to go on a square to a square that is attacked. And if he takes that pawn, then he will be in attack position by the pawn f4. So it is an illegal move. So this position is position of mate, and actually the black won the game. He did a checkmate on white. Okay, there is no way to defend the threat of check by the white. He cannot in any way block the line of the attack, and he has nowhere to escape. As I have already told you, he cannot escape there because of the pawn h5. And he also cannot take the pawn because it is protected by the pawn f4, and he cannot go to the square e4 because he will be also attacked by the black bishop. Okay, all tools eat according to their movement. For example, the bishop will only eat on its diagonal. As I have already showed you, the bishop moves diagonally, and he also eats diagonally. He can eat the pawn g2 because the pawn is on its way of moving. The same thing you can say about the other tools. If the rook, as I already told you, it can go straight, it can go, now the rook h1 is on column edge, and it can go to all the squares except the square h8 along the column edge. So it can actually eat the pawn in h7. And the same thing is applied to the knight. The knight go like the letter L. As when you turn the letter L, it can go here, 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 here. No, it cannot go here because the place is occupied by the white pawn. So, because of the fact that he has the right to go there, if in the place that he has the right to go there is an opponent's piece, an opponent's tool, he can eat that piece. So he can eat the pawn on h7, and he also can eat the pawn on f7. Okay, but we have one exception. The exception is the pawn. Except for the pawn which moves forward but eats diagonally. Okay, as I have already told you in the first lecture, the pawn can move, it moves forward. If he, on the second row, he can move 2 steps forward, but he can eat only diagonally. Okay, that's the way that the pawn eats. Or in this position, the white pawn can eat the black queen like this. Okay, and if it is white in this position, if it is black's turn, the black can eat the white pawn like this, or of course he can eat the white pawn with his queen. Okay, so as I have already told you, the pawns is an exception to the rule of eating. Every tool, yes, the queen, the rook, the bishop and the knight, every tool eats the way that he moves. Every tool eats the way that he moves, except for the pawn, that the pawn moves only forward, but he eats diagonally, in the forward direction, diagonally. Okay? You cannot, for example, the pawn cannot eat diagonally backwards. It can eat diagonally only forward. Okay? If it is black's turn, that's the way that the pawn eats. Okay? A special case of beating is beating through its movement, or en passant rule. As I have already explained the rule of en passant, whenever the white or the black, whenever he moves 2 steps with his pawn. So you should understand that the en passant rule relates only to the pawns. Okay, you can eat if the white moves 2 squares forward, then the black can eat that pawn like this. This is the en passant rule that relates to only pawns. The black pawn eats the white pawn diagonally if the white moves his pawn 2 squares forward, like this. The same thing applies for the other side. If the black moves his pawn 2 squares forward, then the white has the right to eat that pawn like this. I will explain in detail the rule of en passant later. Okay, now I will talk about the stages of the game. The first stage of the game is the opening. At this stage, the player develops his tools, which are blocked behind the row of pawns. Yes, the tools are blocked behind the row of the pawns. In order to allow them, so it develops, every side develops its tools in order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. The opening phase also includes the evacuation of one of the sides in order to allow castling. So you will evacuate the bishop on f1 and the knight on g1 in order to do the castling. The castling aims to fortify the king in a corner and keep him from the exposed center. So the aim of the castling is to protect the king. Yes? And also to develop the rook to center column. Okay, so you do the castling. In this way you protect the king, and you move the rook to a column that is close to the center. A typical opening usually involves a double jump with the king or queen's pawn. So you can develop the king's pawn like this, or you can do the same to the king's pawn. The black can do the same thing. Taking out one or two knights. Yes, you can develop the knight, and the black also develops the knight. You're taking out one or two bishops. taking out one or two bishops, and then the white can develop the bishop, so the same thing can do the black side, and then the castling. So the white in this position can castle, the black can develop his knight, then the white can open, move the pawn from d2 to d3 in order to take out the white pawn, white bishop on c1, and the black can castle, small castling. There are openings called gambits in which one of the sides sacrifice material, usually pawn, in order to take control of the center. So I will show you what is gambit, or I will show you, for example, I will show you what is gambit queen accepted. Gambit queen is when the white develops his pawn that stands before the king, d4, d2 to d4, then the black side they do the same step, and then the white actually sacrifice his pawn. So in this position the black can take this pawn. Actually the white sacrifice a pawn in order to gain control on the center of the board. Then the white can do this move, and it controls the center of the board. It controls the squares f5, e5, and d5, and also c5. So he sacrificed a pawn in order to gain control of the center of the board. Okay, so this is the gambit queen, queen's gambit accepted. We call it accepted. Why? Because the black side actually accepted the sacrifice, the sacrifice of the white pawn. He accepted the sacrifice white pawn. Actually he hit the pawn, and that is the reason that the opening's name is Gambit's Queen Accepted, because he also in this position he can in this position he has the right not to take the pawn and develop other tools like that. Okay, the number of openings is large, and the number of tier variants is even larger. Professional players memorize many openings in order not to make mistakes at the beginning of the game, which will give an early advantage to the opponent. The second phase is the middle game. Took place after most of the tools had already been developed, and the battle is at its most intense in the center of the board. Usually, while exchanging tools and trying to break the other side's pawn alignment. At this stage, it is possible to implement a large number of tactics to accumulate a material and positional advantage. Okay, so in the middle game, you have a lot of strategies and tactics in order to gain a positional and material advantage. Okay, in this lecture I will not talk about those tactics. Okay, the third stage is the end game, and this stage happens when a large number of tools exchanges have been made without a decisive advantage being gained for any side. This stage usually includes a small number of pieces for each side. For example, in the end game, you can have rook and king against a king and a pawn. This is an end game. You can also have a queen and rook against queen and rook. Or, for example, another example is bishop and king against rook and queen. So in this stage, in the end game, the players try to overwhelm each other. They try to overwhelm each other, usually by crowning one of the pawns to a heavy piece, such a queen. So in this endgame disposition, the white will try to advance his pawn to the 8th row in order to replace it to a queen, to do the crowning process, and to replace the pawn to a queen. Okay, at that point the threat in checkmate to the king is small, and therefore the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. So, as I've already told you, the threat of mate for the white king is small, so he will try to advance his pawn to the 8th row in order to do the crowning, in order to replace the pawn to a queen. In this specific position, actually it is the white actually will lose the game, because the black will eat the white pawn, and with a rook and king, the black can do a checkmate to the white king. So this is lost position to the white. Okay. The threat in checkmate to the king is small, and therefore the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. Because the endgame requires precise play, many players carefully study common endgame positions. Okay. Now I will talk about special moves and situations in the game. So, as I have already mentioned in this lecture, the en passant rule, now I will talk in detail about the en passant rule. Pawn can eat another pawn through its course or by the way, only when the opponent's pawn moves 2 squares forward in one move. So if the black, if the white moves its pawn 2 squares forward, then the black has the right to eat that pawn like this. This is the en passant rule. So only when the white moves his pawns 2 squares forward. Only 2 squares forward. Okay? The eat is made if he moves his pawn 2 squares forward, the eat is made as if the opponent's pawn is advanced only by 1 square. As if he advanced only by 1 square. You relate to the advance of 2 squares as he only advanced 1 square, and the black can eat the pawn like this. The en passant rule is only valid immediately after the opponent's move and cannot be used afterwards. So, in this position, if the white moves his pawn 2 squares forward, then the black has the right to eat this pawn like this. But it is only valid immediately. You can immediately take the pawn in the move like this. But if he did another move, for example, if he did this move, then he can no longer eat the white pawn according to en passant rule, because the rule of en passant is valid only immediately. You can eat your opponent's pawn according to en passant rule only immediately after he moved 2 squares forward. If you did any other move after your opponent moved his pawn 2 squares forward, then you don't have the right to use the en passant rule anymore. It is valid only immediately after your opponent makes with his pawn 2 squares forward. Only when your opponent advances his pawn 2 squares forward, you can eat this pawn according to en passant rule only immediately and not after you did any other move. If you did any other move, then you no more can use the en passant rule to eat that pawn. To eat the pawn that made a 2 square move. Okay? So, we finished to talk about the en passant rule. The second special condition is the castling. I have already spoke about the castling in the previous lecture. I will repeat. You have the small castling. You do it in the king side, and you have the big castling. You do it in the queen side. Queen side. This is the big castling. So in the game of chess, the castling is a joint move of the king and the rook that is considered as one move and is carried out in two stages. In the first stage, the king moves 2 squares towards the rook. In the second stage, the rook is moved 1 square after its king. This is the small castling, and the same thing you do in the long castling. The king moves 2 squares towards the knight, towards the rook on a1, and then the rook moves before the king like this. Castling will be done under the following conditions. So you have 5 conditions. If you want to do castling, you must fulfill 5 conditions. The first condition is the king and the rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. So if the king moved to, for example, this square, and then it comes back to the square h1, then you can no longer do the small castling. The same thing is about the big castling. If the rook a1 moved to a4 and then comes back to the square u1, then the white cannot do the big castling. Why? Because the rook has moved from his starting position. So that is the first rule or first condition for castling. The second condition for castling is that the king is not in a chess freight at that moment. So, for example, if the king is in a chess position like that, in this position, the white rook makes a check to the black bishop makes a check on the white king. So in this position, the white cannot do castling at all. It cannot do small castling, and it cannot do long castling also. So when your king is in a check position, you are not allowed to do castling at all. not the small castling nor the big castling. So that is the second rule or second condition for castling. The third condition for castling is that the king will not be found in the freight of chess at the end of the castling. In this position, you are not allowed to do castling at all, not small castling nor big castling. Why? Because if you do a small castling, there your king will be in a threat of check by the black bishop. So you are not allowed to be in a check position after the castling. And for the same reason, you are not allowed to do the big castling, because after you do the big castling, your king will be in a threat position by the black bishop. So this is a position that you are not allowed to do a castling at all. Whenever your king will be in a threat of check after the castling, you are not allowed to do the castling. The fourth condition for castling is that the king doesn't move past the square threatened by the opponent's piece. So in this position, you are not allowed to do the small castling. Why? Because the king will have to pass through a square that is threatened by the black bishop. The bishop is threatened the square f1, so you are not allowed to do the small castling, but you can do the big castling. So whenever your king will pass a square that is threatened by your opponent's tool, if he does the castling, in this situation you are not allowed to castle according to the third condition of the castling. The king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's piece. Also, another example is in this position you are not allowed to do the small castling. Why? Because the black rook threatens the square f1, so you are not allowed to do the small castling, but you can do in this position the big castling. Okay. And the fifth condition for castling is that there are no tools that separate the king from the rook. So, for example, in this condition, in this position, you are not allowed to do the small castling because the white knight separates between the king and the rook. But you can do the big castling. And in this position, you are not allowed to do castling at all because also here the bishop separates between the rook and the king. Okay? A distinction is made between the small castling, which is the castling beside the king, and the big castling, which is castling beside the queen. Yes, I've already explained you about that. If only one of the rooks has been moved, it is still possible for the other rook to be used for castling. So, if, for example, this rook has moved to h3 and then comes back to h1, you are not allowed to do the small castling because the rook has already moved, but you are allowed to do the big castling because the rook a1 has not moved from the beginning of the game. So this is a legal move. Okay? If the square adjacent to the rook is threatened, it is not possible to make a small castling. So in this situation, the square G1 is threatened by the black bishop, so it is not allowed to do the small castling, but you can do the big castling. Okay? That is according to condition number 3, that your king is not allowed to pass a square that is threatened by your opponent's tool during the castling. So that is the reason that the small castling is not allowed. Even if the rook itself is threatened and the conditions mentioned above are met, it is allowed to castle. So in this position, as you can see, the rook h1 is threatened by the black bishop. Even though that the rook is threatened, you can do the small castling. So the small castling is a legal move, but in this position you cannot do the big castling according to condition number 3, because then the king must pass through the square d1 that is threatened by the black bishop. So big castling is not allowed in this position. According to the rules of the game, to make a castling, the king must be moved first and then the rook must be moved. So in order to do the castling, first of all you touch the king and you move it 2 squares, and then only then you will take the rook and move it before the king. The same thing applies for the big castling. You will first of all touch the king and move it towards the rook h1, and then you will take the rook and move it before the king. Taking the rook before moving the king means a move where only the rook moves. So if you touch the rook, then you must move the rook and you are not allowed to do the castling at all. Why? Because in order to do the castling, it is no matter if it is a small castling or big castling, first of all you must touch the king and move it, and only then you touch the rook and move it. If you touch the rook, then you will not allow to do the castling. You must move the rook to any square that is legal square. Okay? The castling is an important move in the early stages of the game because it serves two important purposes. It serves two important purposes. First of all, it moves the king to a more protected place. Yes. And the second thing that and it takes the rook out of the corner and into a better attacking position in the center. So when you do the big castling, for example, in this way you protect the king and also you move the rook to a place where it controls the center of the board, the column D. The same thing applies for the small castling. When you do the small castling, you protect the king and you move the rook to a column that is close to the center of the board. Actually, the rook controls on column A, on column F, yes, that is very close to the center of the board. Okay. The castling is the last move added to the chess rules, and it appears in the book of the French author Claude Groget, in 1560. Okay, so we finished to talk about the castling. Now I will talk about the decision. Okay, check refers to a situation when one of the players attacks his opponent's king that is, the king stands in a situation where in the next move he will be taken if no action is taken. Okay, I've already explained you about the check position. In this position, the black bishop threatens a check on the white king. What does it mean, a check position? A check position is a position that if no action is taken to defend the king can be taken from the board. You actually not you're not allowed to eat the king, but it is in a position of check. That means that if no action is taken by the white side, the king theoretically can be taken in the next move. If the white moves this position to this place from this position, theoretically you can take the king. So that is the meaning of the check position. So the white king is threatened, and the white must take an action to eliminate the check position. In a check position, the attacked king side must cause the check position to stop in any possible way. So in this position, the white must react to the threat of check by the black bishop, whether by eating the piece. Okay, so this is a check position. The black threatens check on the white king, and in this position actually the white can eat the pawn. This is one option where your opponent threatens a check on your king, to eat the piece that threatens the check. Okay, the other option, you can block the fifth, the fifth of the attack. You can block the path of the attack. So in this position, the black bishop threatens a check on the white king. The way that the white can defend himself from the threat of check is by blocking the attack line. This is a legal move. He blocked the attack line of the black bishop. or by moving the king to another square. So the third option that the white has is to move the king to another square that is not attacked. But it must not be moved to the square that is being attacked. Okay? In this position, the black threatens a check on the white king. The white is not allowed to go to square f3 because in square f3 is attacked by the black rook. This is an illegal move. This is also, for the same reason, an illegal move. And this is also an illegal move because the white king is threatened by the black rook. He has the option to go here. It is a legal move. Or to go here or here. So in this position, actually you can go to 4 squares. You can go here, the white can go here, you can go here, and also can go here. But you cannot go to the squares F5, F4, F3 and F2 because it's being attacked by the black rook. If none of these actions are possible, the situation is called checkmate. As I already showed you, checkmate this is a checkmate position. The king cannot go anywhere because he will be threatened by the king in any square that he will go. So this is a checkmate position. A situation in which the king cannot defend himself at all. Okay? So checkmate occurs when there is a threat to the king. It must be a threat to the king. If it is not, there is no threat on the king. If it is not a position of check to the king, then there is no checkmate. Checkmate can be done only when there is a threat to the king. Okay, the second condition for the checkmate is the king cannot escape to any place that is not under threat. So, for example, this is a position that the king cannot escape to any square that it is not under threat. It will be under threat by the black queen if he moves to g1. The same thing is right about g2 or e1 or e2. So the second condition is that the king cannot escape to any place that it is not under threat, like this position. It is a checkmate position. The black did a checkmate to the white king. And the third condition for checkmate is that there is no tool that can protect the king. So in this position, there is no tool that can protect the king. The rooks cannot protect the king, nor the pawns cannot protect the king. So if you have all three conditions are met, then you made a checkmate to your opponents. There is a threat to the king cannot escape to any place that it is not under a threat, and the third condition is that there is no tool that can protect the king. Okay? Whoever managed to checkmate won the game. Also, there are several rules that regulate the matter of check. The player must not make a move so that his king is threatened by check. So, I've already explained you this. I will repeat quickly on this. In this position, the king must not go to the square g2, because in square g2 is attacked by the black bishop, so it is an illegal move. Okay? And when the king is in a check position, he must cause the check position to stop, if possible. So in a check position, you must eliminate the check, or you must stop the check. You must stop the threat of the black bishop. Any other move in a check position is illegal. So if the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes an illegal move, his king must not be hit, and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by check. The illegal move is cancelled, and he must make another move in its place. So, for example, this is a check position. The black bishop threatens a check from the white king, and if, for example, in this position the white side moves his rook, then this is an illegal move, and the opponents must tell him that he is in a check. So we should cancel this move, and the white must eliminate the threat of check, so he must move the king to a square that is not threatened in check by his opponents. Something like that, or here, he can also go here or here. Or he has option also to go here and here. is not allowed to do any other move than to eliminate the check position. Okay, now I will explain you the three types of check. The first type of check is a direct check. What is direct check? Moving a piece so that it threatens the opponent's king by itself is called direct check. So if it is in this position black's turn, he can move his bishop to g3 and threaten a check to the king. So when you move your tool and that tool threatens a check, if the tool that you moved is threatened a check to your opponent's king, like this move, this is a direct check. Okay? Or you can also, in this position, can move the rook and threaten a check to your opponent's king, to the white's king. This is also a direct check because you moved the rook and the rook itself threatens a check on the white king. Okay? This is the first type of check. The second type of check is indirect check. So what is indirect check? Moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack for the piece standing behind it to face the opposing king is called indirect check. So in this position, if it is black's turn and he moves his pawn, actually it does an indirect check to the white king. Why? Because he moved his pawn and he threatens with his bishop a check on the white king. So moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack. When I moved the black pawn, I opened a line of attack by the black bishop. I opened the line of attack by the black bishop. So when I moved this pawn from d3 to d2, I opened a line of attack to the bishop, and this check of the bishop that threatens the king is called indirect check. Okay, I can give you another example. in this position, if the black moves his pawn from f3 to f2, actually it does an indirect check because the black queen threatens the king. So you move the pawn and you create a check by the queen. Okay, this is the second example of indirect check. And the third type of check is the double check. Moving a piece so that itself threatens the opponent's king and at the same time opens a line of attack against the opponent's king for the piece standing behind it, that is a combination of a direct check and indirect check in one move. Is called double check. So I'll explain you what is a double check. In this position, if it is white's turn and he moves his bishop from e2 to b5, he actually creates two checks. He creates check with the bishop on b5. It is a direct check by the white bishop on b5, and he also creates a check by the rook on e1. So this type of check is called double check, a double check. So a double check is exactly what it sounds like. A king is put in a check by two pieces. In this example is the rook and the bishop. The two pieces in a single move. So one check is a direct check and the other check is a discovered check, indirect check by the rook. Okay. And the last, actually the fourth type of check is the cross check. When a player responds to a king threat with counter check while blocking his opponent's king. So the fourth type of check is indirect check. In this position, if it is white's turn, actually it must be white's turn because the black rook is threatened check on the white king. So if the white moves his king to f1, he actually escaped from the threat of the check by the rook, and he created himself counter attack, counter check by the white bishop. Okay, so actually you direct check, you escape from the check of your opponents and you create check by yourself. You can also go to the square e3. From one side you escaped from the threat of check by the black rook and created yourself a check by the bishop on e1. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much.